Hi everyone, it's Tony Tonkin here from the Child Protection Party. Glad that you could be with me tonight, and I'm sorry we're a little bit late than normal, but there have been family issues and other stuff that's got in the way. More importantly, one of the issues that got in the way was actually for those in Adelaide, the Adelaide Crows won tonight, first time this year, so that's something I think is worth celebrating. So I did. I don't know what I did that was celebrating it apart from just letting everybody know that the Crows had won and that it was just a fantastic night, really. It's the first time we've won this year and probably the only time. Such is life. But it's good to see everybody. Good not seeing you, but it's good having you all here to talk about this particular topic I want to talk about tonight, which is on how you want to be spoken to. And I've got a few ideas around that. So I just want to welcome everybody to CPP TV. And I've just changed for a shot screen, so I don't know what the hell I'm doing here, to be quite honest. That's because I'm all excited about the Crows winning, I guess. What can I say? So the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you tonight, and I want you to have this conversation with me, is that one of the primary concerns around child protection and social workers is how we are spoken to. That is how the client is spoken to, and occasionally how I'm spoken to by my colleagues as well. Seems to be somewhat of an interest. Good to see. Oh, Sam's good. I recently had a conversation with Samantha, very recently, like a few minutes ago, and good to see you too, Sarah Jane. So thanks for the two of you for joining in the conversation, even though there's about 9 people on board at the moment. Look. One of the reasons is that the way clients are spoken to is a primary problem, and if the department wishes to improve anything they do, please train your staff to treat clients differently. And I'd like some feedback from you. Hi Tracy, good to see you as well. Let's train people to speak appropriately to each other so that you can get the best and the most out of the experience. So what happened was, and this happens to me, so it isn't just about this week, but usually something happens during the week that makes me think, that needs to be talked about. So here we are. So the issue was a client was talking, no, the department wanted to talk to the client about domestic violence and in her relationship and how that had impacted the kids and, you know, the kids being removed and all that sort of stuff. And the client was adamant that there was no domestic violence in that particular relationship. She had been in another relationship earlier in which there was some violence, and there had been some indicators that the particular person in question, the ex-male partner, was also violent because of some past behaviours. Now, the way the department went about it was like an inquisition. You know, it was like, I've got all this information about your partner, and because this information says that there were times in his past where he was violent, that he is violent. Now, the two things don't match up often, because the client said to the department, look, I appreciate that he has been violent before, but he wasn't in the relationship with me. I have also been in a violent relationship, and I would not stand for a person who treated me poorly or treated me anywhere near how my previous partner treated me. Now, my issue was the way the department chose to explore it. And I see this, God, I reckon I see this from 90% of the social workers. And that is that they say, here's the evidence. This means, because I've got this evidence, this means that I'm right. And it also means that I don't necessarily have to talk, I have to listen to you about your side of the story, because clearly my evidence is accurate and my evidence must pertain to what's happening to you today in this moment. So part of the evidence that they had was like 5 years old. Who knows what's happened in that 5 years? And none of it necessarily related to what had happened in relation to the kid being removed. So why can't you just question it differently? So I was thinking about what do you think that looks like? So how can people be questioned a little differently that isn't about intimidating them? Now, the first thing they could have done was to ask her just a general question about her relationship. So what was this relationship like for you? How did you experience it? And just listen to what she had to say. And because at the end of the day, the department becomes so entrenched with this notion that she was in a domestic violence relationship. And it doesn't matter. It could be about anything. It could be about drug and alcohol use. I had a client, one of the best clients I've ever had. She's turned her life around. She's a fabulous woman, works in community services, does fantastic work. But they had to focus continually on her mental health, and there was no mental health issues, and previous drug use. And she'd demonstrated that she'd overcome the drug use. So why can't social workers work as if they're therapists? Now, therapists don't judge people about their experiences. They inquire, wonder about what happened in their lives and how that had impacted them and how they've chosen to respond around that emotionally. And so I kind of think it wouldn't have been too hard in this hour-long meeting we had the other day, rather than berating the poor client about and insisting that that her previous relationship was a DV relationship when she declares it wasn't. And so what happens though when you start to question somebody and they're adamant that it wasn't the way that it was? Well, I can tell you one thing, they're not going to be on side with you. It's not going to help the relationship. You're not going to be able to come to any resolution or anything that's of value, because the person will become hostile. And it's fascinating. I meet these people privately in their own home or somewhere else, and I experience often really soft, gentle, quiet, sedate sort of individuals. And then when they come to the office and they're met with this barrage of questioning from these social workers, they turn into something else. And why wouldn't you? Because you're being insulted and assaulted, almost verbally assaulted by these social workers who, interestingly enough, I don't wish to sound as if I'm ageist in any way, but are often younger than the client that they're working with. And so my plea is this: for all social workers out there, find ways to work with your clients that is about inquiring about what's happening for them, not telling them what you think has happened to them. This is important because this client would have been prepared to have worked, and this is what I see. I see it, the whole system kind of bastardising over time, because social workers think, I believe, that they have this power and control over individuals because they have their kids. Now, there's no denying you do, but you're not the expert in this person's life. The client is the expert in their lives. If a client says to you, I'm no longer taking drugs, well, go out and you can test them to find out whether that's true or not. It will be exposed if they are still taking drugs. It will become evident at some point. It always does. But, if someone says, I'm not, my relationship wasn't the way you're describing it, then we need to take on board that fact that it wasn't the way that they were describing it. The other interesting thing is that the notifications that come in describing how someone's relationship is usually by someone who does not understand or even know what's happening in that relationship. And in one particular case that I can remember, one of the kids, so a 14, 15-year-old kid who is having terrible issues with her mother, chose to develop and produce some stories relating to her mother and her partner, which was his stepfather, that were unfounded and untrue. But the department grabbed hold of those stories as if they were the truth. And they weren't. They were constructed out of jealousy, spitefulness, something else. So I guess we just need to be really mindful that, you know, there's the trouble is that if there's a notification around any form of abuse, there's no questioning of the notifier. It could be anybody making this phone call. The notifications are confidential, and there's no inquiry as to who the person is that's necessarily making the call, unless they have a professional background, like myself, for example. But generally, anybody can. Now, that notification becomes the truth, and it should never be. I'm now thinking about the Child Protection Party advocating for investigations of notifiers so that we find out who they are. If they're genuine notifications, then that's fabulous and that's fine and they should be made. Does the inquiring about who the notifier is and investigating it further, does that mean less people are likely to notify? Maybe, but it might mean that the people that are notifying are genuine, as opposed to those people that notify in an effort to get somebody else in trouble or make their life a little bit more miserable. I think that we need to really start to focus on exactly what this process does, particularly what the social workers do and what they do that's unhelpful. So the other thing they do, which is another thing that was presented this week, is they continue to tell us what the client's view is. So there's this one side of the spectrum where they'll tell us that, you know, the client's living in a violent and abusive relationship, and fine, the client denies it. And then the other thing that they do, which really annoys me, is that when they do a case plan, which is determining, you know, what's happening for the child, and they're asking a whole host of questions in relation to all of this, they put down, there's an area there on that form that asks for the parent's view. And I was horrified again to see one of these reports done. And I asked the client, I said, look, did they ask you any of these questions here that are on the form? And the client said, no, I've never seen the form. But, you know, this form actually has to go to the court. So it's actually a legal document. And they'll ask you at some point to sign it. So how can you sign this form if you haven't been asked the questions here? Because down here further, there's an area which says parent's view. Now, what they've written in here at the moment is their view of your view. But if they haven't asked you the questions, then how can they put down here that this is your view? Well, they can't. And it really frustrates the daylights out of me, because this is really crappy social work whereby we're taking an interpretation from a series of conversations that we've had about the parent, but not asking them specific questions that relate to the form. Now, this might seem a bit, you know, simple or silly maybe, but it isn't, because it represents what happens by social workers within the Department of Child Protection. They put down the view, so they have their interpretation of whatever it is happening for the parent goes down on this documentation, goes down in their reports, goes down in terms of their assessment of the case. Very little time is offered to the parent to talk about their experiences and how those experiences have impacted them. It is primarily assumption. And very rarely do I see a direct quote from a parent that is positive in nature. So they sit there taking notes furiously for the hour, blah, blah, blah. And then when they write a report, it's extremely negative. There's very little that is positive, that is supportive of the way a parent has experienced their life, how they feel and think about their kids, and a whole host of other stuff. I went to see a client today who's just the most fascinating person I've ever met, and boy, does she get angry with the department. So it's really funny. When you've been doing this job for as long as I have, you get to understand the kind of tricks that they're employing in order to get parents to a point of frustration and anger, so that it looks bad for the parent. So what they did was, a client had done a whole host of programs, she did them online. And all credit to her. She's done it, and doing them online for her, given her level of anxiety and stress, is probably the most appropriate way for her to do these courses. So she did. So they call her into a meeting and they say, look, we'd like to talk to you about the courses that you've done. She showed them the certificates, the client did, and said, we'd like to talk to you about what you learned. And she said, I'm not prepared to do that right now. Because she knew that she wasn't equipped at that time to actually think about what she'd done for these courses. So I said to her, look, I'll come around and meet up with you and we'll sit down and we'll have a conversation about what you've learned. So she'd done 6 courses, right? And she'd written down information that she'd gathered from each of those courses, from parenting to anger management to anxiety. There's a whole host of them. And she was able to write down her notes. So it was clear that she had gained something from the course. But what the department were hoping was that she would demonstrate that she hadn't learned anything. Just think about it. They were hoping that she could demonstrate. Now, why would someone hope that? Why would you even want that from? Why would you want someone to demonstrate to you that they hadn't achieved what they said they had? Now, for someone whose anxiety levels are usually pretty high when they attend these meetings, that was unhelpful. However, the client was smart enough to say, I'm not ready to do that now. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll fill that gap. I'll talk to you about it, which I did. We'll go back to the department. She's got a lot of dot point forms and she's got a lot of notes and stuff. I said, look, bring all your notes along. Read from your notes. The notes are fabulous. And she will be okay. But my point is, the department wanted to set her up for failure. That's what they wanted to do. It's like the woman where they insist that she was in a violent relationship when she said she wasn't. Why do they need to do that? Explain to me how that is working with the client to bring out the best possible outcome for your kids. Because it isn't. It's just wrong. Why do you put the parent's view on a legal form when that isn't the parent's view, because you haven't even asked the questions that relate to that view? Explain to me how that makes any sense. I can run through a whole list of things, these are just a few of them, that I experience on a daily basis about working with clients and the department, where the department are acting like they're not social workers. I don't know. They're not. It's not social work practice. It's something else. I still can't put my finger on it. It's the antithesis, in fact, to what social work practice should even look like. So, how do we combat this? This is the question. The point is, we need to challenge it at every possible moment. So, I had another client last week where they chose, I don't know if I spoke about this in the last live feed I did, but I had this issue with the department choosing to prevent this client from meeting with his children almost forever. So they kind of banned him because these kids apparently are so traumatized by what they experienced when they were with him that seeing him and being with him or being near him or seeing a photo of him distresses the kids. Now, funnily enough, because of the way the department generally behaves, I actually don't believe them. So how do you deal with that? Well, does the department have the right to say that a child should not ever see their parent again? No, they don't. Is that good social work practice? No, it isn't. Is it fair? No, it isn't. Is it equitable? No. Does it sit with the convention on the right, the UN conventions on the rights of the child? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Contact with, and does it fit with research and what we know about children's need to be with their parents? No, it doesn't. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that this particular person should be the one that is caring for his kids. I don't think he's there yet, far from it. But I do believe that it is his right and his children's right to maintain contact with each other, because that is the best outcome for the kids. Now, it might be just 12 times a year, an hour a month, 12 hours a year, big deal. But at least it's some contact. But to take that totally away from the father, I think, is morally reprehensible. And that at the end of the day, these kids, who are quite young right now, but when they reach 18, if they haven't had any contact with their parent, either parent, don't know who they are, don't know the circumstances under which they were taken, and if they survive the system, that is, they come out the system at the other end as sort of reasonable human beings, they'll be wondering about who their parent was, why they were in the situation they were in, and why their parent abandoned them. And to me it's really sad, because there's no way in the world this particular parent is abandoning his kids. The department are forcing him to abandon them. These social workers aren't going to be around in 15, 16 years' time to sort all this out. They're not. They're going to be lucky if they last another 2 years. They're not going to be there. And who will be? Nobody. The department can't even guarantee us that they're going to stay in the same foster family until they're 18 or till they graduate out of care. No one can do that. In other words, their lives are as uncertain as you could imagine. And at the end of the day, they will not know who their parents are, because the department have made a decision that under no circumstance will they work with the parent and the children to improve the relationship with the kids. And that's just wrong. I'm not suggesting it's going to be easy, and I'm not suggesting to some extent it may not be traumatic for the children. But I am suggesting that to abandon the parents and the children in this way is simply wrong. And these sort of situations must be fixed. We have to challenge them. I happen to also, I guess on a more positive side, Samantha Lee, this dysregulation stuff gets me. So Samantha says, the department often says that people are emotionally dysregulated based on their observations. So dysregulated actually means that a parent becomes emotional and at an inopportune time for the department. So a parent becomes emotional, cries, gets upset, may even gets angry, because you've got their kids and they think that's unjust. Is that unreasonable? No. No. Would it be helpful if we understood why a parent was angry? Would that kind of mitigate the circumstances just slightly? Yeah, maybe. Blaming them for their emotional state, though, that's wrong. That's wrong. So why do they do it? Why do they do all of these things? And look, and believe me, I'm just talking about the tip of the iceberg here. Why do they do all of these things? Particularly when working with the family and not denigrating people because they believe they weren't in a violent relationship and the department's convinced that they were. Denigrating people by insisting that you're right and they're wrong because all of this upholds their version of you. They need to believe, in order for them to have your children, they need to believe that you're a really shitty person. Not just parent, but a shitty person. That you can't manage your emotions, that you don't know how your life has been, you don't understand how your behaviour has impacted your children, that you're ignorant, that you're naive, that you're stupid. That's how they see you. And it's wrong. Because I can guarantee you that there are many people I work with who, frankly, are often far more intelligent than the people sitting on the other side of the desk. They may not have a degree. They may not have the same understandings and knowledge that perhaps someone else might have on the other side. But they've lived a life that has taught them some serious lessons that the person on the other side of that desk just does not have. So, I guess at the end of the day, we have to continually push back. And I think the important thing about the Child Protection Party is that that's what we do. We try and push back every day against these inequities, the injustice. We want a system that's fairer. We want people to practice what they should be practicing in terms of social work. We want them to practice in a way which is going to help and perhaps even heal. You know, the thing for me about the parents that we work with is that they all want some help. I was with someone recently who's had her kids removed, and she said to the department, 5 years ago I was having trouble with my eldest daughter, and I came to you and asked you what I could do. And you told me to go away. You told me that you couldn't help me. Here I am now, and you've got my kids, years later. And you're still not telling me what I can do. But you've stepped in and taken away my children, but weren't prepared to help me when I asked you for help. The first client I ever worked with, which is over 12 years ago now, she had her child actually taken away because she went to the department because she was homeless at the time. She was concerned about the relationship she was in, and she was concerned also about her mental well-being and how that would impact her parenting. And she lost her kid. Explain to me how that's fair. And then today I went to a meeting with a client and a couple of social workers, and the social workers listened to the client. They were great, seriously. They were amazing. It, though, was a long-term team. So it was a team whereby the child had been removed, they were already on a long-term order, it was just about discussing access arrangements and so on. They had nothing to lose by listening to the parent and adjusting some access arrangements and working with this parent, because this person is extremely cooperative. So it's easy. It's not that easy working with some of the kids, granted, but it's easier working with the parents because the hard decisions have already been made and you've already got the kids. And I've often found that those teams are easier to work with, and they're more likely to practice social work as it should be practiced because they're not a threat. Except when we did say perhaps this person, this parent, could apply to have his son returned to him. And then we get, no, well, we're not going to do that, even though the kid's asking to be returned. And then they throw in, though, and this is where they kind of messed it up. They were travelling along so nicely. And then they say, but, well, you know, you could go back to court. At which point I say, how many children have you known that you've been able to have an order revoked? And social worker looks at me like it's a real troubling question. Well, I don't know what to say to that, but, you know, you could, how many kids? And she says, well, there've been a few. I say, out of the thousands of kids that they've got, there's only a few, you know, and under what circumstances are they returned? Because they're probably 14, 15-year-olds voting with their feet saying, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I want to go home. And then I said, you know, if you go back to court, you'll know you won't get legal aid for that. Because no one gets legal aid to go back to have an order revoked. At which point, the social worker had to agree with me. So, you know, it's a crappy system and it needs to change. You know, there aren't all that. Now, I'm going to finish on this note because I've probably been talking for too long now. But I do thank the people that come online that have bared through all of this. They've now got a system that they're implementing. Sorry for laughing at it. Called the Sanctuary Model. Now, the Sanctuary Model, if you look it up, is really about changing a culture within an organisation. Basically, to get people to work differently and to acknowledge, you know, all the stuff I've talked about tonight really is about kind of the sanctuary model. To get rid of people that are negative and bring in people that are more positive and more better trained and better equipped to do the job. Basically, you know, in a nutshell, there's lots of other stuff in it as well, but basically that's kind of what it's about. Now, they tried to do this in the department here in South Australia some years ago with a strength-based model, which I'm trying to remember what that is, SPC. Someone will tell me. Anyway, and on the surface of it looked really great. A bloke by the name of Christensen from the United States said, nothing ever comes from Australia because obviously we're not smart enough to develop this stuff ourselves. So it all comes from interstate, or overseas rather. And it has to come from America because, you know, they're the mightiest and the greatest and, you know, they know all the answers, obviously, even though they have one of the world's worst child protection systems. So they've got this system that they're planning to bring in, which is designed to change the culture. It's not going to happen. I'm telling them they're spending, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars on this program. So the person who runs it in the US is probably rubbing their hands together thinking, well, thank you very much. But it's not going to work, I can tell you now. Because when they brought this other program in, I'll never forget this, I went and saw a social work, I was in a social work office, I'll tell you which office it was, Port Noarlunga. And I said, look, how's the new program going? And the social worker's response was, they're trying to teach us Social Work 101. At which I thought, you don't even know what Social Work 101 is, so even Social Work 101's going to be an improvement on whatever it is you think social work is, buddy. But that's the attitude. The attitude is that they can't be taught anything because they know it all. It's the same attitude. They have the same. So I just want to say to Rachel Sanderson and anybody else from a department out there that thinks that they have the solution to child protection, you don't. The interesting thing is that we at the CPP do. You know, rarely do they ask us for our input. And I wonder why that is. I have as much experience working in this field as does anyone else. I live it, breathe it, think it, act upon it every day of the week. I've been doing that for over 12 years. Do you think I know something about this system? As a social worker who believes in my profession, do you think I understand how this should work? Yeah, I do. I do. I can go through the social workers I've seen over the years and tell you which ones have value, which ones can be better trained, and which ones need to be sacked. I can tell them that. and that would improve their system by at least 50-60%. I could improve it to a point whereby we could be ensured that, at least 60% of children with a lot of work could probably be returned back to their parents now. And that would save millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars each year, that alone. And the kids would not be worse off. I'm not suggesting their parents will be perfect, but they'll certainly be better than the state. And we need to start thinking about some of this stuff. And for that reason, it's important to register with CPP so that we can ensure that we're in a position to make the changes that I'm talking about. So if you haven't registered with us, you haven't become a member, I urge you to do so. Because the only way we're going to solve the problems that concern you about kids generally is for you to band with us so that as a group, as a collective, we can make the changes that are necessary. So on that note, look, I don't know whether I said at the beginning that Avery's not here because he's a little unwell at the moment, poor old fella. But we're expecting him back by our next live feed on Thursday, so hopefully he's not coughing and spluttering, because if he is, you'll have to just put up with me. So thanks everybody. I haven't been able to go through all of, there's a fair few messages happening here. Right, I will read through some of these. I can't see. Tracy says it's all about funding. I saw someone arguing the other day in a video, and I've heard this argument thousands of times, that it alluded to the fact that social workers get a bonus for the number of kids. They don't. That's crap. That I will agree, though, that this industry employs thousands of people, and without it, there'd be a lot of people without work, I can assure you. So it is an uncanny industry. The NGOs, I think, are the worst of the lot because they're the ones with their nose in the trough, expecting to get as much money as they can from it, and are reluctant to change the system because it would mean a lack of funding to them if they did. So I accept all of that. But as far as individuals making heaps and heaps of money from child protection system, I don't believe they do. There is an argument, though, from adoption processes, maybe. Some professionals and some organisations are likely to make a lot of money if adoption became a big deal, and if adoption became the alternative to child protection services. So that is something to watch out for, and something that the CPP is guarding against adoption, period, and adoption as a financial system which rewards people for ripping away kids and then selling them to parents, basically. So there's lots of things to be wary of. I've had to learn child protection statute, life of my own, summons, if don't legal aid, get Tracy, get all that. Right, Patricia Bells has given me a new email address. So I want to thank Michael. I honestly don't know what KPIs they have, and I don't think I really care, frankly. If you have evidence to demonstrate what their KPIs are, more than happy to look at it, just to inform myself. But I don't know what... it actually makes you wonder if they actually honestly do think of these parents or children in the long run. Yeah, I actually think that to some extent these social workers do believe they're doing the best thing for the kids. I actually think that that's because they don't know an alternative, that this is just kind of the way it is. So Let's just see what happens. And look, thanks. We've had a lot of people join us tonight, so thanks very much for joining in. And I look forward, hopefully, to catch up with you later on when Avery and I get together. And just remember that think about how you want to be spoken to. And if people are speaking to you in ways that are unhelpful, politely tell them that they are, and that you wish for them to change their behaviour. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being with me. Take care.